Hey, this is Grant with Grant's Rock Warehouse, and today we've got two guests. Got Marco from the Contrarians and Ryan from Ryan's Vinyl Destination. And today we're going to discuss the Klassik 78 album Phantoms, which came out in February of 2022. So we're just going to review that and see what everybody's take on it. I mean, basically, this band is a band of musicians that have gotten together and emulated the Kiss sound from 1978. It's just really amazing that they can put out something so high quality. I mean, I don't want to review it yet. I think I'm going to start off with Marco today because we always start off with Ryan. We're going to start off with Marco today, and then we'll go to Ryan, then we'll go to me, and we'll just discuss it. Hopefully, we can get this cranked out fast and be on our way. So, Marco, go ahead, and what did you think of that record?
Awesome. Thanks for having me on, Grant.
Of course.
I want to start by saying I did listen to the first side of the Klassik 78 EP that they put out. I purchased that when that came out. I purchased the second side as soon as that came out. And now I've listened to this one quite a bit. I'm a pretty big fan of these guys. I like what they're doing. In fact, I actually told, when we were filming in person, the Contrarians early on, I told Martin, I asked him if he knew who these guys were, and I explained the concept to him, and he was really excited about it right away. And I think he went and purchased the first EP right away. And I remember him saying to me something along the lines of like, this is such a great concept that he had that idea, not for himself, but he said that he had thought years ago, like, why hasn't anybody gone and made like a new Beatles album? Not the Beatles, but like a new album that sounds like the next Beatles album or a new whatever album from pick a band. So he kind of had, parallel thinking. People think kind of like alike. So I think these guys nailed it. First of all, especially when I first heard the first Klassik 78, they nailed it. They got everything right. All the voices sound okay. There's one thing I think one of the first EPs, there was a song that I think they were trying to make it a Peter Criss song. And I think it was Mean Business or Ain't No Fool. It was one of those songs from one of the first two EPs. I don't know if you know what I'm talking about. And I remember the first time I heard that track, I remember thinking, is this supposed to be a Gene song? Or like, I don't get what they're going. Eventually I figured out, I think this is supposed to be the Peter song of the album. And that one did not work for me. It didn't sound like Peter. If that's what they were going for, I think they should have just forgotten about it, because if you don't have a guy that sounds like Peter, like the way they did with the Ace voice, especially the Paul voice, the Paul guy nails it, the Gene voice, like why bother kind of thing. And that's where I think, at least on this new CD or this new album of songs, they didn't have that Peter track in there. And that was one of the things I was actually looking for. So I was wondering if they were going to try to cover that base again.
On that Izzy Presley interview that we were talking about prior, those guys were on there talking about they basically, if there's, they need a guy that can sing Peter Criss. So they were like putting out feelers. So if someone can sing like Peter Criss, we might be able to use you. But I think Mean Business, I think he's doing a Gene voice. But in the interview, he's improved on the Gene voice as opposed to where he was back there in 2017. Because on the new record, I think he nails Gene.
Mm-hmm.
I mean,
absolutely.
I thought they did great with the Gene voice on the first two EPs, except for that song and the name Mean Business. Just everything about that song, I started thinking maybe this was supposed to be a Peter thing.
It could have been.
Yeah, this album is really good. The production is solid. The playing is solid. The lead, the solo work, it's like, it sounds like it's either Ace or it's somebody trying to like a Tommy, or like it sounds like Ace solos.
It sounds just like Ace. In the interview I heard, he said, yeah, we used a Marshall super lead on that for the Ace Frehley solos. Evidently that's what Ace used or whatever. But the fact how they emulated that, they got all his licks totally
nailed
down.
it. Yeah,
nailed it. I mean, Ryan, did you think the same way on that?
I did. I thought that all the way down to the way the drums sounded, for the most part, there was a couple moments where I didn't think the drums sounded exactly like a Kiss type of thing, but they were still great. But I think that there's moments where you have like that heavy tom sound as like the verse is happening with like nothing else. It's not just like Kiss, but definitely the guitars sound spot on the entire time.
The one guy was saying, yeah, I got this little small crate practice amp that's solid state. And evidently he used that for a lot of just the rhythm stuff because it had that tonality. I never really thought about Kiss guitars sounding like a solid state amp, but he said it just worked.
Yeah.
But they use a lot of different things, but I think they tried to emulate most of it as much as they could. You know, like the whole Peter Criss drum sound where it's kind of got that ringy type of, I don't want to say, I don't know how to describe it, but the way Peter kind of hits the rim and hits the snare. I mean, Charlie tried to emulate he said he was channeling Peter Criss. So he was like really into it. I mean, they tried to get it down to a T. And I think it's like if this is like the album, I don't know. For me, it's kind of sounds like it's Rock and Roll Over mixed with Love
Just
Gun.
to Kill a little bit. I hear Dress to Kill in there. Especially the Gene songs. I hear Rock and Roll Over and Dress to Kill.
Yeah.
Especially on the first EP as well.
But go ahead.
I definitely hear the Rock and Roll Over more than anything on the album, which makes sense given the time, you know, since that was right around 70. I think that was 77, that album, right?
Rock and Roll Over came out in 76.
Was it 76?
Yeah. Love Gun is 77 and Alive too.
Yeah,
this actually there's stuff on here. My favorite stuff on all of the Klassik 78 releases are the Paul stuff. The guy who does Paul's voice like nails it, and a lot of my favorite Kiss songs are Paul songs. But I hear a lot of Paul's solo record on here too, especially the opening track, "Show Me Your Love." The way it starts, the melodies, just everything reminds me of. It's funny. It's if Paul went and recorded his solo album and then brought "Show Me Your Love" back for a Kiss album. You know, and that's probably my favorite song on the album. Is "Show Me Your Love" is the first one.
Yeah, nice, that's great.
Really good song.
I probably should have mentioned who was on here. It's Tom Higgins, who plays the lead guitars, bass, backing vocals. He does the voices of Gene and Ace.
Nice.
He's the guy that kind of put this whole project together. And it's Joe McGinnis, who plays with Chris Jericho in Quarantine. He does the Paul Stanley voice. And he plays a rhythm guitar, acoustic. He does the lead and backing vocals. And then you got Charlie from Anthrax, who's the drummer. But Charlie, though, wasn't on the first two. He wasn't on the two EPs. The guy in the interview, there was a guy named Rory that played drums. I don't know what his last name was. I couldn't find it anywhere. But he just kind of bowed out. He just didn't want to do the project anymore. And they kind of presented it to Charlie, you know, you want to maybe drum on a couple tracks, and he was just totally into it. If you ever seen any videos with Charlie from Anthrax, he's a big Kiss fan, huge Kiss fan. So he just loved this project. And well, if you listen to his drums, he fits right in, you know,
definitely
perfect.
Yeah.
It's those three guys.
I did kind of feel like it was two different drummers versus the EP and Phantoms. I think you could definitely tell that Charlie's probably the better drummer of the two, because I think there's some moments where he really kills it on the drums, and good fills and some wild fills actually on the album.
I was just curious, do you guys think how do you look at the production on the new record as opposed to the other records? Because the other records to me seem kind of more lo-fi. I don't want to say that, but it almost sounds like more the lo-fi Kiss era to me. And the new record seems like it's more updated, more, I would have to say it's more 1976, 77 as opposed to like 74, 75. I'm just curious what you guys thought.
I personally like the production on the EPs a little bit more. Just felt more like an authentic Kiss production to me. I think that they about 99% nailed it on Phantoms, getting the production down, but there was moments where it felt like a little bit more modern production to me, and I kind of noticed that myself. So I kind of liked the sound of the EPs because it was more consistently like 70s Kiss sounding, even it was more of like the lo-fi era.
Mm-hmm.
I think the EPs remind me more of like Dress to Kill, and this reminds me more of like a Rock and Roll Over, if that makes sense.
That's kind of what I was thinking, that Phantoms is more Rock and Roll Over era, more that, Kramer kind of sound, I think.
Yeah.
The songwriting in general reminds me of both of those albums, both the EPs and this album.
Mm-hmm.
I'm pretty impressed with the songwriting. And it's interesting when you hear Paul Stanley, like in the last handful of years, talk about how like they don't they're discouraged from writing a new album because they think that fans aren't going to like it, or they're just going to want to hear the classic songs or whatever anyways. Mm-hmm. But when you hear this, you think like, man, if they released this, I think fans would be happy with this. They'd love this,
Yeah.
Especially the other two recordings as well.
Oh, I agree. I mean, I think it's a really weird concept, honestly, but it's brilliant at the same time. It's like, I feel like a lot of people, me personally, the reason why I hadn't heard any of this until now is because I just figured it was going to be like any other tribute band. I didn't expect these guys to be as good as they are, honestly. I was really impressed, especially as I was listening to the EPs and Phantoms. I think it's all great. But I think one thing that I noticed that's different between the two is that the EPs kind of have more of a jammy type of feel to it. Like they're just having fun with this concept of like, oh yeah, we're going to sound exactly like Kiss. Let's riff around, have some fun with it. It sounded like that to me. And I really like that. Then you get to Phantoms. It's like they fully honed in, like, how would Paul write a song? How would Gene write a song? How would Ace write a song? And that's what these songs are going to be. So it's pretty nuts because I feel like they really got into those guys' heads and knew what they needed to do to make these songs. It's really impressive. It exceeded my expectations heavily, all these releases.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I like all three, but I do think the songwriting has improved on Phantoms, I think. Of course, they've had time to, don't forget, they've been trying to hone their craft on this. The first two came out in 2017.
Yeah.
So obviously, if you're going to work on these, you're going to hone your craft. And I think they really did. I don't know. Are there any like tracks on here that you guys really thought were really impressive on the new record, or anything you want to talk about?
Yeah. My favorite tracks on the album was Show Me Your Love, Smoke and Mirrors. Walk That Walk is my favorite. That riff on that song is absolutely killer. And so are the vocals on that one too. I love that song. It was like one of the grooviest tracks on the album. Kind of had a little funk to it, which is good for Kiss. I mean, they were very R&B influenced, so you need to have that. And they got that groove down perfectly. Yeah, those are my three favorites. I thought consistently the album was fantastic, though, but Walk That Walk was my number one favorite. Smoke and Mirrors, number two, and then Show Me Your Love was my number three.
The cool thing about Walk That Walk is when they trade vocals on that, because that's something that Kiss used to do, and then they kind of stopped. Other than every once in a while, like I think on God Gave Rock and Roll to You, they trade vocals, but they did that on the first couple of albums, and then they kind of stopped later. Rock and Roll All Night is a huge example of them doing that, and I like how they did that on Walk That Walk. Rock and Roll Over is a good tune. That's a great Gene sounding tune, or whatever.
I was just thinking, Marco, is what a great title for a song. Not only is it a great title for an album, but wouldn't you have thought that Kiss might have had a song named Rock and Roll Over? And it's just nice to see that they were able to produce something, and it kind of fills that niche. Yeah. I don't know. I just think it's a great title, just in general. But that's a great track.
It was. great closer track too,
Mhm.
honestly.
The other cool thing I wanted to mention about the vocals and the production of the vocals is on. I like all the Paul tunes. I think they're my favorite. Same with the first two EPs, Passion and Love off the second EP and Standing Tall. Like those are great tunes. Hot on Your Heels. On this one, I think it's Queen of Hearts. I'm looking at the track list right now. Queen of Hearts. I think it's technically a Paul tune, but you can hear the Gene voice in the lyric vocal mix. So it's almost like Paul's singing the vocal. He's the lead vocalist, but you can hear Gene in the background. And you can hear that on Kiss songs, even in the 80s and stuff like that. And I thought that was I think they were doing it on purpose here. I think they're trying to hit those nostalgic notes. And again, that's another way that they nail it.
Mm-hmm.
There's a good tune off of Dynasty. I think it's Save Your Love, where it's an Ace tune, but you really hear Paul in the chorus, especially at the end. And that's what that reminds me of. I love hearing a Kiss song where one guy's the lead, but you can hear the other guy. You can clearly hear them in the background.
There's an Ace Frehley song, and I can't remember if it's Rocket Ride or Shock Me. I love both of those. Those are like some of my two favorite Kiss tracks ever. Mm-hmm. But you have to really listen to, like with headphones, you can hear Paul Stanley singing on the background vocals, because Gene, I don't think's on it at all, but Paul did the background vocals, and it's just like what you're saying, exactly like that. Yeah. And I can't remember if it's Rocket Ride or Shock Me. It might be Rocket Ride. It's Rocket Ride, because there's some speculation on whether Peter Criss is playing drums on it. Might be Anton Fig. Who really knows? But you definitely can hear Paul Stanley on it. You know, I always understood that track was Peter Criss and Ace Frehley, but Paul's definitely singing on it. So that kind of derailed everything, but it's a good example. Anyway, go ahead, Marco.
Yeah. One other thing I wanted to mention about the sound, and this might actually be a reason why you hear the production difference on the first two EPs. Mm-hmm. From what I remember about the first two EPs is I think they were trying to make it sound like you were actually listening to a record, like a vinyl. You actually hear the needle come down and the vinyl start, I think, on the first track, and then the first track of the second side.
Yeah.
And they might have tried to make the production make it sound like it was like a stereo, like a vinyl stereo or something like this. And maybe on this new recording, I haven't listened to these interviews. I know they've actually done a bunch of interviews recently. I haven't listened to any of them. I listened to a couple back when the first two sides came out. When the first two sides came out, sorry, I'm derailed onto another
you're all right.
topic. But I remember to be honest, I remember being more excited to hear the first two sides than this one. This one's kind of like, oh, okay, cool. I'd like to hear those songs. But the first time I was like, wow, this is a great idea. I'd love to hear, because you heard little snippets. I think they released Standing Tall, the full track on YouTube. And I thought that blew me away. And I remember thinking, like, this is amazing. I got to hear this. Like, this is the Kiss album we didn't get in '78 kind of thing, right? But that might have a reason. That might be the reason why the production maybe sounds a little lo-fi to you, is because I think they were going for that sound like you're listening to a vinyl, where now I think they got rid of that gimmick or that concept.
Yeah, the new one doesn't have that.
I kind of preferred that a little bit, honestly. It took me back, as someone who's listened to those Kiss albums on vinyl a lot. It brought me back to hearing those older albums and like that raw kind of production, although I think it is still pretty good. I don't know if lo-fi is necessarily the word that I would use. I don't think it's
lo-fi.
It's very clear production, like definitely clearer than you get on some of the earlier Kiss albums. But I think that it has a big warmth to it, though, which is something that I think is actually a positive of all of these albums, is that even though they harken back to that more vintage sound, I think you get a bigger production on all of them than you got on those early Kiss albums. So things like the riffs almost hit you harder than they would have if they were recorded as like a 70s Kiss album. Because I think a lot of those songs got, even though I love the sound of the old Kiss albums, I mean, it's almost kind of unanimously said that a lot of those songs became more powerful on the live album just because of the sound on there. And, I think that you got that big sound on all three of these, especially this album, though, because it is more of an advanced production, a bit more digitized, I'll say. It definitely has less of an analog sound to it than the EPs did for me, which is one thing I did like about the EPs. As we're listening to albums that are from the 70s, it's kind of cool to have that more analog sound to it.
Mm-hmm.
Um, yeah, but I agree completely.
Yeah. I mean, anybody that likes 1970s Kiss, you have to search these out. I mean, I'm not trying to plug it for the band. I just thought that this is something that people need to see. Because if
Mhm.
you love Kiss, if you like anything pre-Creatures, pre-Elder, that golden era, Love Gun era, you have to seek these out. And I think you can get it, at least in the States, you can go to Amazon, you can go to iTunes to get it. And they do sell CDs at Newberry Comics. I think that's the only place that sells a CD. And I think it's all online, but it's just great. And it's so much fun.
Definitely.
Like some of the ones I think Show Me Your Love's outstanding. It's kind of got that Black Diamond kind of intro.
Mm-hmm.
And then as soon as the guy starts singing as Paul, you just absolutely are just blown away by it. Because it's not something you would never expect anybody to be able to emulate 1970s Kiss as well as these. It's just amazing.
Yeah.
And then when the Ace solo comes in, you sit there and go, "Oh my God, it sounds just like Ace." The same way, his same technique, his same tonality. I don't know how they do it, but you almost swear that it's him.
Or it reminisce, like you remember, like, oh, this solo reminds me of 100,000 Years solo.
Right.
Or Paul, or the guy on this going, yeah, kind of reminds me of when Paul does that. You know what I mean? Like, it makes perfect sense too when you think about like how fans of stuff like Star Trek and Batman, they go and do like fan made films. Like you can go on YouTube and see like a really high quality Batman film that was made by fans, and it's not like an official DC thing.
Wow.
Right? They go out, they build the sets, they get the costumes, they get, you know what I mean? Like and because they're passionate about it. And that's what this reminds me of. And it makes sense because Kiss was always kind of a little bit different than other bands like that. Like they had Kiss conventions and they had the action figures, and like their fan base is very passionate, and it makes sense that this happened. This is like a fan made album, right? Like you would see a fan made Star Trek movie.
Mm-hmm. That's actually an interesting thing that I was thinking about with all three of these releases, but I mean, even more so with Phantoms because it's a full length album. On this album here, you basically have straight rockers all the way through, which is different than a lot of other Kiss albums. I mean, it's almost like a fanfare Kiss album because it doesn't have any of those divisive kind of songs. Like if you go into this with an open mind and you're okay that it's not the members of Kiss, I can't really see any songs on these albums that are going to stir up any controversy with fans. It's not like it has your Beths or your Great Expectations or things like that, where you have some fans that really like it, some that hate it. There's nothing like that on this album. It's like a fanfare Kiss album of straight rockers, good grooves all the way through. And that's just really interesting because you didn't get that on really any of the 70s albums, even though like that's something that I love about the 70s albums because it made Kiss different. They were quirky, they were weird. And so I think as future releases come out, I think it would be cool to see them experiment with some of those quirkier aspects of Kiss. And another thing that I think would be really cool, because they especially nail the Paul, Gene and Ace. I love the Ace vocals so much.
The Ace vocals they're
nuts. Because the Ace songs are typically some of my favorite Kiss songs. I love his voice and I love his songwriting too, but like it would be cool to see them do like a solo album type of thing where it's still like, but it's still like the members of Kiss playing, but it's like an all Ace songs album, an all Paul song album, an all Gene album. And if they get someone who could sing Peter really well, like an all Peter sung song, and it's like they channel the songwriting to be like each one of those members for those albums. So like they could basically do the Kiss solo albums again, but like a different perspective on it. That would be really interesting.
I'd love to see these guys tackle something like a Klassik 82 and do like Elder Part 2 or something like that, you know? Like I'd like to see them move forward because I like the concept. To be honest, to go back to my earlier point, I wasn't as excited about this. And I do feel like they broke ground with the first EP, that they're not really breaking new ground, I guess, with this one. It's cool to hear more songs. It's cool to hear more 70s songs, but I'd like to see them try something different and move forward with it and be a little more forward thing and do like Klassik 82, Klassik 88, 89, like classic, you know what I mean? Like go forward with it and see what else they can do.
Well, yeah, because I mean, if they stick with the same concept over and over again, people will get sick of it real quick because you can only hear so much of that one period of Kiss album after album after album. I mean, I could listen to it over and over again, but it would be cool to see other things. I think even for me, listening to these 3 releases consecutively, I was like, man, the first EP was the perfect amount of time for this concept. Second EP, perfect amount of time for the concept. Go to Phantoms, I'm like, it would be cool if they switched it up a little bit, have a different kind of style of song for me, just because it really is all straight rockers. And I mean, while that can be a really good thing, I think it will be good to hear if they start to experiment with other things. Even if they did Klassik 79, they do Dynasty, that'd be super cool. Like,
well, I mean, some of those on the new one kind of almost go into that territory. I thought Living Fantasy, which is the Paul vocal, it kind of reminds me, it almost touches that Dynasty era type of songwriting. You know, they kind of just, you know, they try to cover wide variety. Like Smoke and Mirrors, I think could have been on the Ace Frehley solo album. You know, I mean, that's what I heard. And I just thought that sounds just like an Ace Frehley solo track. But there's Gene background vocals, so that kind of kills that. But it's just classic. That's all I can say.
Yeah,
you know? Oh,
definitely.
You guys, anything else to? I think we pretty much discussed it. I think we all highly recommend it. And for anyone, seek out the EPs if you can. I think you can still download those off of iTunes or whatever, but you know, it'd be nice to support this project because it's very unique. And if anyone nails it, Klassik 78 nails it.
I agree.
Anybody have anything to plug before we get out of here? Because we're pretty concise on this.
Yeah, it's great. Yeah, so I have channel called Ryan's Vinyl Destination, also a Facebook and Instagram. So on the channel right now, I've got a series about Genesis that we're just about to finish up. We've gone through the entire discography. Last episode will be about Calling All Stations. We'll be recording that tomorrow. Also have an Aerosmith series right now where we're also going through the entire catalog. Tonight, actually, Grant and I will be recording the episode about 9 Lives and Just Push Play with
you guys. Don't take a break, eh?
No, it's a weekly thing. Every week. Well, no, the Aerosmith thing's been going. How many weeks has it been going, Ryan? I don't know.
It's probably a couple months.
Months.
Yeah, but we're doing that, and we'll have one episode after this one. Then we're going to start doing a ton of other bands. And we have a Police series coming up. And then we're going to do Queen and Alice Cooper and tons of other bands too. And got some other various topics. And then on Facebook and Instagram, got some reels of albums I'm listening to, written reviews, some guitar videos. I share my articles that I write for Sea of Tranquility on there. And then there's a ton of other good channels to check out. You know, Sea of Tranquility, Rock Fantasy, Rock Daydream Nation. This one called the Contrarians.
I've never heard of them.
Tim's Vinyl Confessions, Bicycle Legs, My Music Corner, Davies Cinema Picks or Davies Cinema Flicks and Music Picks, etc. There's tons of good channels out there, so check them out.
I couldn't have said it better myself. Thanks for the plug, Ryan.
Yeah.
You can see these fine gentlemen on the Contrarians, and Grant, you did a great job tonight.
Hey, thank you. I appreciate it.
Yeah, definitely.
All right. That's it, kids. Go out and try to support Klassik 78. If you're a hardcore Kiss fan, at least a 70s fan, these guys have nailed it.
Mm-hmm.
What can I say?
Definitely.
All right. I'm going to hit